you.
And you are now live.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to open the Planning Commission work session and regular meeting for December 9th, 2025. And begin by establishing a quorum. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll, please?
Yes.
Or-
Ms. Firehawk,
Present.
Mr. Carazana,
Here.
Mr. Missile,
Here.
Mr. Moore,
Here.
Mr. Bivens,
Here.
and I have Mr. Murray in remotely via Zoom.
Great. So we've established a quorum, and now I understand, yes, Commissioner Murray would like to join remotely.
I
Yes.
move to allow Commissioner Murray to join remotely.
Before we do that, we just need Commissioner Murray to state his reason for
Okay.
being absent. Commissioner Murray, are you there?
Yes, I'm here and I'm at home and due to poor road conditions.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone who would like to make a motion to invite him?
I no longer
Like you
know.
did.
I motion that is an acceptable reason and we would like to have him join remotely.
Great,
A second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Moving on to the work session. I think that's our next item, right? We're good to go. The 2025 land use build out analysis. I'll ask for the staff presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is JT Newberry, and I'm a senior planner in the Department of Community Development. I'm joined here this afternoon by several of my colleagues to help assist with the presentation and the Q&A portion. We have quite a bit of information to get through in the next 90 minutes or so. Much of it was provided in the materials ahead of today's meeting, so hopefully we can move efficiently through it and reserve as much time as possible for questions and feedback from the commission. So for today's agenda, we'll begin, it's kind of split into two parts. We'll begin by looking at the 25 build out analysis, and then we'll move into a new tool we have under development. It's a draft that we're calling the AC44 analysis tool. We'll take all of your questions and feedback and help that inform staff's preparation for a board meeting on January 21st with the Board of Supervisors on these topics. So why is the capacity analysis important? It's fundamental to us taking the next steps after the adoption of AC 44 and implementing the comprehensive plan, especially administering the growth management policy. It also supports other areas of the county, like the board strategic plan goals, specifically those related to quality of life, infrastructure, and placemaking. And monitoring this information will be critical to advancing meaningfully our efforts on goals related to housing and economic development, but it will also serve to help a variety of other lines of effort as well. And the AC44 analysis tool we're hoping is especially helpful for future development proposals, trying to evaluate those. So just to give some recent history, the first part of our work session today is somewhat backward looking. It's looking at the information that was provided during the development and adoption of AC 44. You'll notice that attachment 1 to the materials today was provided during phase 1 of AC 44, the 2022 land use build out analysis. And today we'll be talking about the 25 analysis, which was reviewed in phase 4. The Board of Supervisors received essentially the same information on September 3rd prior to adoption on October 15th. Part of the 25 analysis really replicates the exact same methodology and approach and assumptions of the 22 analysis that was done during phase 1. And that was done purposefully because we were trying to, for the first time, have the opportunity to take this information and have an apples to apples comparison, be able to draw some trends, and try to have a longer term look at it. This effort has been done over the years in several different ways. The 2015 comp plan had a staff-led analysis of this type included in the appendice to the 2015 comp plan. In 2019, there was a growth management report that focused exclusively on residential information and was completed by staff. And then in 22, we hired Kimley Horn to help us with a little bit more of a sophisticated approach. And we replicated that in 25 with the help of another consultant, Line and Grade. Some of the information is displayed, particularly in the 2025 memo that kind of summarizes the 25 analysis, is displayed by neighborhood. And we recognize that neighborhoods are not something that we often talk a lot about. And so we wanted to make sure for any members of the public that may be unfamiliar, neighborhoods 1 and 2 are included in the Places 29 master plan. The Pantops master plan is neighborhood 3. The southern and western neighborhoods are neighborhoods 4 through 7. And then Crozet and the village of Rivanna are their own standalone master plans. But some of the information you may have noticed was broken out by neighborhood. Two important definitions that I want to cover as we get into the analysis itself. First is the definition of developable or redevelopable. So again, this is going back to the 22 analysis. That is looking specifically at parcels that are a minimum of 2 acres and have a land value that's greater than their improvement value, or it's vacant. That together is comprised of the parcels that were considered developable for calculating capacity. The next definition that I think is really important to try to understand these results are the theoretical maximum build-out. And that's the term that's applied to the maximum development capacity of an individual parcel that was identified as developable. So if we use, for example, 1 acre of land that had a designation of urban density residential that has a maximum capacity of 34 dwelling units an acre, this analysis would have said that 1 acre could support 34 dwelling units. So the overall research approach really attempts to combine a few of these different figures. The development pipeline refers to projects that are either approved and not yet built, or those that are under review. Those two numbers together are the development pipeline, and then the theoretical maximum build out is what we just described. That 1 acre of urban density residential that could yield up to 34 dwelling units per acre. You combine those to get a total. One example of a project that I imagine you've seen in your travels around town is Old Ivy Residences. It's under construction, but no one is yet occupying it, so it's included in the development pipeline. Just to dig a little bit further into how that build-out estimate works, we would have identified, the analysis identifies those developable parcels, and then it makes some assumptions about a few different factors. Factors for the environment, so this might be floodplain or steep slopes, infrastructure, things like roads, and then open space. And it removes that area from the theoretical developable acreage, and it applies a set of build-out assumptions based on the land use designation. So that's a little bit of a step through of how the analysis gets to these findings. So for both residential and non-residential, we'll quickly look at 22, and then we'll look at 25. So in 22, our total theoretical maximum build-out was just over 24,000 units. And this slide shows you how the development pipeline figures into that overall figure. In 25, we see that had decreased to 21,644 overall units. And this slide kind of gives you a comparison between both of those. I'll go back for a second. If we look at the overall decrease in the total between 25 and 22, it's just over 2,500 units. Interestingly, if we add up the number of units that were produced, that were actually delivered over that time frame, it's just about 2,900 units. So there was a large portion of that overall decline that can be explained by, well, these units were actually taken through the pipeline and constructed and produced. And there is a little bit more, and I think that has to do with the changes in value over time, identifying parcels in 25 that were developable that may not have been developable in 22 and vice versa. Moving on to non-residential findings. We can see that overall, there is a continuation of this trend of a decrease in the overall square footage of available capacity within our development areas for different land use types. Included in this slide is part of what was included in the 22 analysis, which was an estimate of demand. There was a range of demand for different land use types, and you can see that the 25 figures all exceed the expected 20-year demand on the high end, at least in 2022. So there were some overall findings that were interesting to observe and discuss. Notably, the overall developable acreage has decreased from 6.9% down to 6.1%. And when we think about the remaining developable acreage, we see it's almost split between those that have improvements and those that are vacant. And so, something we hear a lot in community development is that, all the easy ones are taken, all the easy land has been developed. And this is an interesting observation that we'll talk more about later, just informing what are the strategies that we need to be pursuing, what are the efforts that we need to be focused on in order to spur redevelopment of parcels that currently have improvements. A big topic of interest from the Board of Supervisors was how are we doing in terms of approving projects, the density that we're approving them at relative to the maximum under the comp plan. So in the 2022 analysis, which looked at from 2016 to 2021, there was an overall observation that about 58% of the maximum recommended by the comp plan was ultimately approved by the Board of Supervisors. Under the 2025 analysis, that number was largely the same. It was 56%. However, when we look at the data, there is a bit of an outlier, and if we exclude that, it was the largest amount of housing units that were approved by any project under the study period, which was up at North Fork. That was 1,400 units. If we remove that from the overall analysis, we get to 70%. And so we see that there is some increase in the overall density of projects that's being approved. So I'll just talk a little bit more about that for just a second. The analysis works largely the same when we look at the projects that have been approved versus the analysis that was done for the build-out analysis. We start with the overall acreage for a project. We remove the assumptions for infrastructure and environment and open space. We multiply that by the max recommended by the comp plan, and then compare that to the number of units that were ultimately approved. So if we look at North Fork as an example, that was rezoning just a portion of that overall site from PDIP to Neighborhood Model District. That was 172 acres. Under the rubric of this analysis, that 172 acres drops down to about 120. The closest land use designation there with residential included would call for 34 units an acre. That's under urban mixed use. And so that would theoretically have yielded just over 4,000 units, which is quite a lot. And so compared to the 1,400 that were approved, we would say that this developed at 34% of the overall max recommended by the comp plan. But here's all the projects from that time period, and you can see kind of the distribution of dwelling units within these different groupings of approved density versus theoretical max. And so the vast majority are somewhere between that 50 and 79% figure. As you're probably, as probably what's going through your head, there are a number of constraining factors to developing at maximum theoretical build out. That this is meant to be a very high level, broad brush look at the information as we administer the growth management policy and try to figure out do our development areas have enough available capacity for our future plans? So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but one thing that has, as we've been undertaking this effort, we've really begun to identify the questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we attempt to implement the comp plan. And so I mentioned, redevelopment strategies. We're certainly focused on some of those big moves and, areas within the activity centers. But then also other parts of the comp plan, the economic development strategic plan, how can we attract more private investment? Are there opportunities where we could proactively align the zoning map with the land use map? And before we get into the AC 44 analysis tool, I just want to mention in moving from the 22 analysis to the 25, we've gone from paper to digital. So Line and Grade effectively took the approach of the 22 analysis and put it all into Excel. So moving forward, we will have the opportunity to do more, I think, intricate analysis, more real-time analysis. This is no longer a 80-page PDF that we're working from every few years. We're trying to move it to something more digital. So, we talk about it as moving from report to tool. And so it will not only help us with administering the growth management policy, but we're also excited about the opportunity to provide even better data to other partners that we work with. So I think that's a good point to pause if we want to talk about questions related to the land use analysis. I can also keep going, and we can do everything at the conclusion.
That's great. So quick question, how much more time do you need as we think through this?
I
No rush
think-
at all.
I think about 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So why don't we take a pause and start asking questions about this?
Okay.
While we've got it fresh in our mind.
Yeah.
Want to start down here, Karen?
Yeah, I have a couple comments, and you don't necessarily have to have an answer for the comment/question. It would, considering, I'll just put it, I'll make this premise, considering that we have amazing GIS in our county, a very good system, it would be, the tool could be a bit more nimble if we could also link spatially those parcels that are analyzed with the school district capacity and then also the roads capacity, right? Because those are two of the major factors where like like the density could be this, but it fronts on a road that's really overloaded and we don't have any good public transportation system. And, so just to give us a more nuanced picture, because it could be that teases out that there's places in the county where growth potential is severely hampered by roads. I mean, we kind of anecdotally already know where those places are, right? But I just feel like just looking at from the parcels without the context of where they're located, I just think that we could tease out some more of those constraining factors and not then use those constraining factors as so too bad for those areas. The roads just aren't good enough. Then we have to start saying, well, there's why the county, if it wants to meet its growth goal, not growth goals, but our capacity to keep within our urban ring. Therefore, we have to spend money on transportation in this sector, or we just can't develop this out. I think that we could come up with something that'd be a little more involved, but I do think that it's doable. So that's my comment for now.
Can I just expand on that a little bit, just from real life experience?
Go ahead.
You too.
No, I was going to express too, but go ahead.
All right.
Headed.
Sorry, just because you used the example of North Fork, right? I started to think about what is it that limits developers to being able to develop, and it's obviously environmental conditions on sites, so it's critical slopes, things like that. But it is also the exposure to limited traffic, right, or limited transportation opportunities. So as you look at it, as a developer, you're like, well, we can contribute via proffers to it. It's going to cost us this much. You put that into your capital, into your pro forma, and you determine really how far you can go. But if the traffic's there, if the transportation opportunities are there, it doesn't burden the developer, right? So it's just so I love the idea of tying this somehow to transportation, schools, other infrastructure, water and sewer, and thinking about master plans that are in place for RWSA and others, and how does that connect here, and how do each one of them inform each other? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where I was going with it. And, right now, our process, something grabbing me by the back here.
Grabbing your swim.
I know. Right now we get projects, right? And we do get this information, but it's project by project. There's an application and okay, well, there's so much burden on the schools, there's so much burden on the roads. And we get that from one project to the next. What we don't have is whether it's some kind of heat map or is a way to raise awareness of here are the areas in the county that are prime for development, high density development, because they have the road infrastructures, right? Because we have the school capacities. And just having that awareness, I think, will help as we plan. It will feed into our community development and how we plan our community better. And perhaps having the conversation with our development community and say, hey, folks, here's where we have the capacity and it's ready to go. And also identify the areas that with some improvements could get us there to that higher density. So it would be a great tool, I think, if we actually had that, just in terms of raising awareness throughout, because there may be folks that know this already, right? I mean, Mr. McDermott was involved in transportation and a bunch of other things, so he probably said, well, yeah, I know where you can build, but many other people don't. And so I just think that would be a great resource.
Gentlemen?
Guess you all were in my head. That was the exact question I had, but I even took it a step further and was curious about, the number you gave was 58% in terms of what we've activated on respective parcels, like on average, I think it was like 58% of like density. If you look at the current infrastructure, and I just jotted down roads and schools, nothing else, but like, is that able to even accommodate the 58%? What would happen if we were able to get to the 80%? Would we just crumble, right? Like,
Right, that's
some insights on that piece, right? But exactly, y'all were in my head, so that was the exact question I had, but just dialing it a little bit more with a fine tooth. So.
Yeah, I've got some comments. I was looking at the numbers from 2022 and 2025, and I'm glad that it came up on page 5, although almost like a footnote about the 58%, 56% figure being kind of what we're actually building. I find it then kind of odd to focus so much on the max buildable units. I don't know if that's going to be useful then as a tool for when is the development area full? That's kind of like the question we're really asking, right? It's like, when is the development area full? And if we look at this number and say, oh, well, there's 21,000 buildable units, no problem. We've only got demand for 12 or 13,000. Like, yeah, those are numbers, but is it really 21,000? Like, and I think you already alluded to this in the presentation more than in the written portion. That no, it's not going to be 21,000 for a few reasons. One is that the max build out of parcels to be developed. There's no way we can do 100% build out on every single one of these parcels for a whole slew of reasons. Also, will all these private landowners want to do development in the next 20 years? I mean, 44% of these are land with improvements. That probably means somebody's living there. Do they want to redevelop and move? Later in this meeting, we have a parcel that far as I know, would qualify because the land is more valuable than the improvement. They want to put it in a conservation easement. So, I think that speaks to how this number is not going to be the number. And then I think also, are these population estimates assuming things that are actually changing? And by that, I mean, we've got economic development happening quite successfully in terms of AstraZeneca's announcement. And I think the goals continue to grow more. If we make room, will that population increase more? It certainly could. And so I think we could be seeing a higher population growth and a lower number of actually buildable units. And I think we're going to find ourselves full before this 20 years runs out. And so to me, I start thinking, I'm like, well, we're a planning commission. Let's start planning for like where we go next. That's a long conversation, but we should start it now, not 15 years from now.
I think that just to expound, I think that's in large part the reasoning for tying this to the comp plan, right? Because
Yeah.
that is how we plan for the long term and
Totally.
thinking about that piece, yeah. Commissioner Bivens.
So, thank you, Chair. So I need to just sort of clarify one thing. It feels like we're still talking about net area to be developed, which I had thought we had gone to gross. And so there's that piece there that I need to just put a big Julian note on. That if we're going to do that, then I think hopefully we can also become more deliberate in what kinds of things get built. So if the county's going to say we're going to use net, I think the county should put itself in a position to say we'd like these types of development because you're impacting the market one way or another. When you say that you have this much land that you can develop on, then I think the county can also say that we would probably give you a bonus if you develop these kinds of communities. I'm just putting that out there. Now, my other piece coming forward on here is that, and this is coming to some of my colleagues, I believe that going forward, you would be greatly informed, and this whole process be greatly informed if we did a couple of things. If we were able to put down and include in a very special way what is county-owned land that could be developed and what is schools that could be developed. Because we're seeing in a number of communities around this country, we're seeing those people who have issues with workforce housing, that the municipalities are stepping into that space to create and to partner with developers to create spaces that are for those kinds of workers. We talk about how we have a good amount of our private people and probably some of the public people who are living outside the jurisdiction. They will do that because they want to. But there's the whole idea of how when you attract new employees here, they don't know that there's an option necessarily. I think of my colleague at the end who tells me about she hires people, but they have to live in Richmond. Now, Richmond has its own benefits, but they live in Richmond because there are different types of housing opportunities there that they are not able to get in Charlottesville, Albemarle area. So when we think about things like that, think about who owns the asset and who has the ability to move the asset in a direction that provides the type of housing that is actually needed in this community. Then the other thing that I'd like to also sort of see in here, I think there is a real, we have in our community at the Dairy Building, CoStar has an office here. CoStar is one of the leading lights when it comes to the analysis of property in this country. And we have one sitting in the Dairy Building. I think sometimes it would be helpful to have our assumptions challenged by actual data. Sometimes it feels as we have our assumptions challenged by our guts or about what we see in our parochial worlds. And I say that intentionally about myself, but I think we would benefit if we could see some of the industry, what are towns that are trying to deal with the kinds of issues that we're dealing with? How are they going? And what is the housing market? What's the commercial market? I use them a lot in starting making some of my own personal decisions. I found that having access to that data would probably help you all, but it would help these individuals, it help us, and it would help the supervisors. Here's my other piece on this. I also think that it would be helpful to have a more frequent analysis by the Weldon Cooper team. I mean, creating a model with them that is actually updated on an annual basis. And I've had an opportunity to sit in a presentation by a gentleman by the name of Hamilton Lombard, I think was a demographer, and to hear in very interesting ways what our community looks like as far as demographics and what our community looks like 10 years from now for our demographics. And then I had an opportunity to look at our census 1 year out from 3 years out from 20. And the majority of the young people in our community are right now 16 and 17 and 18. That's where the bubble is. So when we start talking about new school systems, I think it would be helpful instead of having individuals who have vested interest in what schools get built in which locations. Particularly, I'm always concerned about that since their children wouldn't go there, since it will take at least 20 years to get 15 years to get a school built. But they're saying now they want the school built in this particular location. To be able to make those decisions and give the Planning Commission the ability to push back when we have emotional presentations that the data doesn't say this. And in our community around schools, not only does it really say that, but the number of private schools that exist in the Albemarle County, Charlottesville County, is beyond anything in my professional life. And some of you know what I did for a living, that I've seen anywhere in the world. The per head private institutions and the emerging home schools of very bright people who can't get employees here, so they decide to stay home and teach their children, is unlike anything that I've ever seen. And I don't believe that's going to change. And so I want us to make decisions, particularly CIP decisions, around data that actually is supported either by observation or it's supported by decent models by robust models. And that's the thing that I think when we look at this. So going back to, are we net or are we gross? If we're going to be net, then I think that's a fair opportunity for the county to step in and say, we're going to give you some we're going to encourage you to build these kinds of things. Much like we did with Home Depot, much like we're doing up 29 North. I think we have a role as a county to say, we'd like you to build these types of houses and we're going to make this happen for you, and not leave it up to the market, because the market will rarely find a return on investment that will support the other types of investments. It's not, and that's not, I'm not saying anything against the private market. I'm just saying if we look only for market-driven solutions, then we will most likely see communities that are built that cost significantly more than the average worker or the typical worker in our community. And that, I don't see how we get to this. I see how this is descriptive, and I appreciate this analysis because it is descriptive. But now I'm going to step into the thing is, what are we saying as a community? And I don't think this will get us to what the community is demanding, and the fact that 60 some odd percent of the county's revenue comes from individual housing, comes from personal real estate. Personal real estate is not going to build roads. Personal real estate is not going to build a new, hopefully not a new northern high school. It's just there's not enough capacity there to do that. And if you look at our bond rating, well, you'll figure that out. Our bond rating can't stretch to that kind of debt service. So it's thinking about, what do you need to step into? It's a different level of analysis of what I'm really pushing at that allows those kinds of decisions to be made. And we have the data. We live in a place that's rich with smart individuals who can help us think through some of that.
Commissioner Murray.
Yes. For me, the definition of developable in the 2022 report is insufficient. And last time I looked, it excludes areas like Rio Hill. As land supply becomes constrained, the land price relative to improvements will change, making more parcels developable. We also should consider how incentives might change the formula for what is redevelopable. Thus, by itself, this is not really a good tool to tell when the development area is full per se, because that's a dynamic changing thing over time. And we only have to look at our neighbor Charlottesville to see that. There's areas in Charlottesville that we've seen be redeveloped that if the same kind of parcel was in Albemarle County, would say, well, that's redevelopment is not possible there. It seems like all the metrics really seem geared towards greenfield development. If we want to encourage redevelopment as per the comprehensive plan, we really need some metrics specific to redevelopment as well, starting with a map of parcels that have more parking and impervious surface than is really needed. Knowing which areas have the physical space for redevelopment could help us identify the hurdles and incentives that may be necessary. We could even proactively apply incentives to those hard to redevelop places.
Great, thank you. I just have a couple of thoughts, and as I'm looking at my questions, I think you'll probably answer them in the second part of the presentation, but I just wanted to jump back. And just, I assume you'll talk about how environmental conditions are measured, how when you look at the formula for theoretical versus the pipeline, and you discount the developable area based on the environment, for example, or other infrastructure, is there any kind of special sauce that you use to do that? Or is it as straightforward as saying, we know the total acreage and, slopes, or we know the capacity of the water service in this area, et cetera?
So page 11 of the 2022 analysis has a large table that assigned different assumptions to these different categories
Right.
based on, my understanding is largely the kind of the predominant geography of an area. So if there were certain sections of the development area that had more floodplains, steep slopes,
Yeah.
other things, they were assigned a higher percentage to come out for environmental factors. There were so there's a table that sort of outlines that, and it also differentiates between different land use types. So based on the land use type and based on the location, there would be a different assumption.
So I thank you for that. I think my point is that I think it's worth looking at that list again and seeing where we stand with each of those elements as things change, as our comprehensive plan comes forward. Are we changing the value of each of those, or the limitations or opportunities within each of those categories? Just another check. I may walk away with, now they're fine. The other is, do two numbers a trend make, right? As we're looking at 22 and we're looking at 2025, have you looked back beyond that at historical information, or I guess there's some of that in those documents, but have we gone further back, like as far back as 2010, or just to see a more direct, scatter categories?
That was not done for this analysis. It's a really interesting suggestion. The approach was, apples to peaches to oranges
A lot of
to,
fruit.
yeah, I mean, it was close, but not the same.
Yeah.
So, I think if we're comfortable with that kind of caveat, then, it would be interesting to see how the distribution would fall out.
Yeah, and I think if we're looking at things like what are the trends, right? If we're looking at, okay, when will we run out of development area? And so there's a curve involved here. It doesn't have a lot of data on the curve yet, or maybe it does, and we just need to kind of zero in a little bit more on that. And then as you think about incentives, to Commissioner Murray's comments, I had that thought as well, or think about other opportunities for infill and or redevelopment, adding those as opportunities, I think are key.
Can I
Yeah.
just ask a question on that point? So how, in these studies, how are you considering the redevelopment opportunities?
Yeah.
Are they considered at all?
Isn't that it's the land is more valuable than the improvement, right? The 44%?
Are you talking about opportunities to redevelop development areas?
Oh,
Right.
Yeah, so in the residential context, if it's a minimum of 2 acres and the land is worth more than the improvements, it's considered eligible for redevelopment.
I thought you were going to say what are within those redevelopment areas, what are the areas we're looking at to either incentivize them, or, are we talking, what are some of the strategies that we're looking at to leverage the benefit of that? Because
Yeah.
'Cause-
That's the piece that I think we're more comfortable with that than the people above us.
Mhm. Well, I think and the point to eventually running out of space in the development area, there'll always be opportunities for
To knock
redevelopment.
down, right?
And so if you're focusing on that almost first.
Let's
right?
let's play with that a little bit. So a couple things happened. There was a decision on whether or not we should go to the Rivanna and dredge it out
Yeah.
for more water. We didn't do that. There was a discussion on whether or not how we deal with fill.
Yeah.
So I knocked down a building, I can only have this kind of fill to take it over here. That then sends a real clear message. So we're not proactively
Yeah.
trying to increase our water supply. I mean, we are, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. And then we throw an obstacle up for someone who wants to do a brownfield development on how far they have to carry the detritus after it's finished. And what is the network? And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to blow over the environment. So please, no one interpret this. What I'm saying is that, oh, he's trying to blow the environment up. The one I'm saying.
You want to fill streams? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
could I please? Because I want, you know what? I want some swimming holes.
Yeah.
I missed my swimming hole from when I was a kid. So the whole idea about what's the network of policies and things that we have that when I stand back as a developer perhaps coming in, I said, damn, this place is really difficult to do any work in. And either I've got to bring a bunch of money to it, like Greystar, who brings a bunch of money to the projects that are here, or if I'm a small developer like Karen and I say we're going to develop something, we say we're not doing this here. We'll go someplace else because it's too complicated. I'll go to Nelson County where I know they want some housing. And so it's the whole idea of what are the signals that we're saying? What are the downstream signals that this community is sending when we really talk about are we looking for any significant increase in the housing stock here?
Yeah, can I just add
Yeah.
real quick? Like, I was thinking about this in terms of what we consider redevelopable, and I understand your math for the land is more valuable than the improvement, but if I was a developer and I saw, 6 5-acre tracts with ranch houses on them, and I'd think about combining them and then going up, I'd have a very valuable infill development. And this is happening all over the place.
Yeah.
Certainly in Charlottesville, and I even driving out Avon Street Extended, as right, think about that road. There's a bunch of really dense development tucked in there, and then there's like ranch houses.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we are going to take their houses, but I'm just saying that could be old Mrs. Smith, the made up person, wants to retire, and I'm sure those people get approached all the time. I mean, so I don't know how those tracks would come up if you did an analysis. Would they come up as, developable or?
Well, the
I
other,
just think there's a lot of redevelopment potential with a lot of very low density tracks that are still within the urban ring that a developer would find attractive. But it also goes back to the point Julian was talking about how hard is it to develop in this community? And that's why I keep getting on the bandwagon of why don't we just rezone it to what we want? Because it's the going through the development process that people don't bother trying to get the higher density. You've heard that time and again, like, well, I was going to I'll just do the density it's already approved for. It's too hard. And then all the angry citizens are going to come out and say they don't want this next door, and the board of supervisors will cave, and whatever people think. And so it is hard, and that reputation that we have, I mean, there are reasons why it should be hard to develop. We don't want to blow up the environment, even though Julian does. Just kidding. But even so, I think that we need to make it easier to develop, not just use our current system.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say, and there may be developers out there that'll say otherwise, but it seems to me that the first thing out of the gate is if they're looking at a development opportunity is not to say, this is going to take us 3 years to do, so we're not going to do it. I think it is part of the equation. I think the major part of it is what can we afford to do on this piece of property? What is
Right.
the,
That's right.
what does the
That's
pro
right.
forma look like and how can?
Right, and the cost of going through that 3-year process
That
gets
is,
factored into
it is
deciding that it
added
isn't worth
cost.
it.
It is added cost. Yeah. Yes. Ms.
Excuse
Florida.
me, Chair Missel, Jody Filardo, Community Development Director. It's 4:47. We've got 10 minutes more of stuff we want to share with you all. And your work
Can discuss
session is
more.
ending quickly. So just wanted to
Thank you.
give you a time.
Thank you for
check.
keeping us on track. So we have until, am I right? Until
5:30.
5:30?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
We'll talk for a half hour after the presentation.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah, she's saying that. She's
All right. Lonnie, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's permanently up or if it's new.
Yeah, it's just a real quick thing. I mean, adding on to what you said, if we take some of these areas we consider undevelopable right now, if we proactively rezone those areas for redevelopment at higher density, or if we proactively offer tax incremental financing, it'd be nice to know how does that change whether it's redevelopable or not. And I think that's something I think we need to look at.
Point. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will turn it back to staff.
Hey, well, thank you so much for that awesome feedback. I think if I was to channel my inner consultant, who's not with us tonight, he stood up at the board meeting to say, I think along the similar vein to a lot of your feedback, one of the benefits of moving to this kind of digital tool is those assumptions can be run and tested as we find consensus and agreement around these different factors. There's an opportunity there to make those changes. So I will highlight the value of his work for him since he's not here to do that. So turning the page then from the 2015 comp plan and into AC 44, the last attachment 5 to the commission's materials for tonight was a draft tool. This is a first attempt at tracking how current development proposals are aligning or not to the maximum theoretical capacity as called for in the comp plan. Notably under AC 44, to some of the earlier discussion we had just a minute ago, AC 44 is explicit that future development proposals will be evaluated under gross density. And so that's just a shift that we can keep in mind as we go forward. At random, I selected this rezoning as a straw man for discussion today. This is a fairly small rezoning down Avon Street. This is a little over 3.5 acres. The comp plan under the 2015 comp plan and AC 44 calls for neighborhood density residential, which is 3 to 6 units per acre. And so if we were to look at attachment 5 and the first table that you have there, it's attempting to look at what are the existing conditions on the property in the first row, where there are currently 2 housing units that are occupying a very small amount of that acreage. If we were to compare it to the future land use under the comp plan, it would be about 9%. The second row looks at the theoretical maximum using gross density, which would call for 22 units. And in this case, the applicant proposed 21 units. And so we see that it would be about 96% of the comp plan's theoretical max is the applicant's proposal to build up to 21 units. I'm going a little bit out of order and I'm skipping down to table C just to keep this within the flow of the presentation to be totally on market rate information. This information would be those big totals that you saw from the 2025 land use build out analysis. Is that something that would be valuable to see on an ongoing basis in the context of current development proposals going forward? And so here you've got the pipeline, how many units are theoretical, and then the total. And then some of those non-residential land uses for consideration. And then table B on attachment 5 looks at housing, and it's attempting, I think this could be useful in a scenario where we're trying to understand how much more or less affordable housing would be provided based on the intensity of the development that's before you. So if our current policy would call for 20% of the constructed units to be provided as affordable, and the applicant is proposing a max of only 80% of what the comp plan is looking for, then we can begin to see the delta between what we would hope to achieve through the comp plan and versus what's actually constructed. And so this would not replace the affordable housing analysis that's currently shared by the housing office. This would just augment and try to show, okay, the comp plan would call for 3.3 affordable units based on this designation, which would round up to 4. The applicant, through their proposal, is still eclipsing 3. And so there's really no difference, even though they're not maybe hitting the max, they're still achieving the same number of affordable units. So the intent here would be, this information would be included along with narrative in the staff report that would just try to talk about the growth management policy on a more regular basis going forward. And it would include, this potential for both market rate and affordable housing, and help us with our overall tracking of the development areas. And then to conclude and wrap up, over time, both of these tools would help us administer the growth management policy and implement the comp plan. And again, identify those questions that we should be asking. Is it specialized redevelopment? Is it more infrastructure focused analysis? What are the questions that we need to be answering to put the planning commission and board in the best position to make the best decisions possible? I'll end it there.
Awesome. Can I ask just one question about that? So when you're looking a couple slides back, when you're looking at, for example, affordable housing here.
Yeah.
And even the prior slide, as this comes out, that one, this will come out as part of the staff report for each one. And is there a way to compile this like in an ongoing basis, a tally, so that, the January 1 is going to look different maybe than, or there's maybe some data that says over the last 3 months, this is what we've seen. So maybe that 4% net across all the projects that have come before is really increasing to, I don't know, 0, or decreasing to a minus 10%, right? So seeing if there are trends, might be interesting to see another column that shows that.
Thank you for that feedback.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something, and Commissioner Bivens brought this up in terms of the net and gross, and it's something that when I was going through the materials, it wasn't clear to me, and so Mr. McDermott and I had a conversation yesterday about it, but I think it might help the point that Commissioner Bivens was raising. So the theoretical max is based on the gross. Is that correct?
Yeah, so under the analysis of the land use build out analysis, it's looking at effectively a net calculation because it is removing area for open space and infrastructure and that kind of thing. However, AC 44 marks a significant shift in that and is explicit to say we're going to use gross density moving forward. And so, I can let others, senior leadership speak to this. There may be value in both. If we want to have a continuation and kind of a long-term look in apples to apples, maybe maintaining the current approach of the land use build out analysis from 22 would make sense. But for the purposes of AC 44, it's clear that we will instead use gross as displayed in this table.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful I get the benefit of having that continuity, right, with that the net provides you. However, with the gross, it would then suggest that you can have you can have more development. So whether the theoretical max, right? So I think that's the one that is important. What is that going to be tied to? The theoretical max. So if I'm saying that's the most you can possibly do. Want to jump in? No, okay. Yeah. If that's based on the gross, I think that's really what's going to tell us that, well, yeah, you can obviously, and maybe there's height restrictions and all the things that we need to talk about. But that theoretical max, I would propose should be based on the gross. Okay. It's not that we eliminate the net, because I think there is value in that, in having that more of an apples to apples to previous. So anyway, that's
Can I
great
ask you just
feedback. Thank you.
quick question though? I mean, I thought we have to amend our code of development to allow for using gross, right? That not right? When they calculate how much they can develop?
Sorry, the AC 44 does now actually state that we will use
Gross.
gross density.
Okay, but that's
So-
a, comp plan's a goal. Don't we have to change code? No? We-
No, there's no code that
Okay.
aligns to
Okay.
that. The code really references what is said in the
Okay.
in the comprehensive plan. And I'll just say, related, after our discussion, we talked about this a lot, and it really gets to what Commissioner Moore was pointing out too, is that we can use gross, but we also think there's value in recognizing net, because if we're trying to track this over time and figure out how much land is really still available in our development area, we do have to recognize that that it's not always going to be developed at that gross recommended density. So it is good to have, I think, both perspectives on that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
Other comments, questions?
So I do have a question, and this is around the AMI. And so looking at that and understanding what we're doing there, and just sort of wondering, what would be the process for us to recommend a change to that? So that in fact, if we look at the median household income in our community, it's like $103,000. Even if we take, as it's listed here, we still exclude a bunch of people from housing, or from these kinds of houses. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do we make a dent in that? And is the only way to make a dent in that, A, to get the county involved more and sort of being prescriptive, as opposed to being hopeful about housing? Or is there a way to look at what the AMI should be, could be, to be more, to give additional individuals opportunity to live in the new inventory?
Well, I think we appreciate the question.
Idea, right.
Um,
Thank you for the
I'll
idea,
just-
but we're not going to do that.
I'll just say, right, that what we're looking at right now are the tools that we're trying to look at to evaluate these issues. I think a lot of what you're talking about are things that these are this is work that we want to do in the future related to how we implement AC 44, how we implement housing Albemarle. These are bigger questions that we've been discussing for the past 3 years as we updated AC 44. I think that we're going to keep trying to bring these things out as we move forward, but for now, what we're just trying to do is show you this is our analysis and our tool that we're trying to use to move forward.
Yes, I agree with Mr. McDermott. Bart Swoboda, Deputy Director of Community Development. When we see zoning mod come forward and those alignments with AC 44 and those sorts of things, that's when we'll look at how we're going to implement the information we learn from this tool. This inventory of kind of what we have is different than, what we're going to do with this. So this is we're taking inventory. This is our pile of lumber. What are you going to build out of that? We're not going to use the material sheet to do the design. We're gonna analyze that stuff that we have, and then we'll figure out based on, our areas, whether or not we're gonna break down developable area different, things like that. But so this is gonna change a little bit as we start to use it and as things start to align moving forward. So the where we're to look at that to Mr. McDermott's point is as we move forward with the ordinance changes and aligning those things, that's where we want to look at different housing types, height, those sorts of things.
Chair, could I just ask one?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've wrestled with, particularly west of town, is that parkland, which was public parkland and other parkland all had the same color, which I can't tell you the number of conversations we had to have here with people saying, you can't do anything on that. That's parkland. No, that's a private parkland and as opposed to public park.
Trees on somebody's.
Yes,
property.
trees. So am I also in following up what you're saying, Mr. Blow, is that we're going to see when it comes to greens, a different green for public parkland versus just a bunch of trees?
I would say possibly. So I want to be careful with the
I understand.
variety
I understand.
of colors that we use, right? So if I pick on ARB for a minute, the color wheel of 274 different shades of
Oh, hello.
whatever, right? We just want to be clear that the folks that we want to get the message to, that we communicate at an understandable level,
Okay.
right? So
That's
52 colors on the map. And if I speak for myself, I like the 8 crayons. I don't like the 72 crayon pack. There's too much going on there. Right. And so whatever message we want to send or however we're communicating on a particular project or a map, GIS, whatever that is, we want to understand how our folks hear, not necessarily how much we talk, how we communicate, what we say, it's how we say it and how they're listening to us when we do that. So that's going to be important. I think that Kevin can probably speak to the maps a little bit better and what changes we anticipate. But I think they'll be more moderate or they'll be more subtle.
And I will add that in the latest, in AC 44, our land use map did break those colors out more. I think we'll probably, as we move forward with small area plans, we'll probably look to do that even better. But we did separate these, environmental features green from parkland green in the latest AC 44. And Lonnie.
Great. Lonnie, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's just, when you look through the numbers, not to beat this to death, but I think that we do need some numbers here about redevelopment. So I think when a project comes before us, it'd be nice to know what percentage of this development is greenfield versus how much of it is redevelopment. I think, but with rolling that up at the county level to knowing how much redevelopment we're doing versus how much greenfield development. And then in terms of redevelopment, I think we also need to think about the types of redevelopment, particularly targeting areas like excessive parking lots. I think that's something we've all identified as something that should be a priority. We should also target areas that are brownfields. I know that there are areas in Crozet that we really hope to have redeveloped that are brownfields. And I think when we do that, we should have a county metric that we're meeting something when we develop those. So those are the comments that I would have. I think we need to have some solid numbers there about redevelopment, both on a project level and at a county level.
Great. We're all in discussion, but just one thought that came to mind. If we zoom out on this and we just take the basic, like, what's the purpose of even doing this exercise? Why do we care, right? Initially, we care because we want to maximize density in the development areas, to maximize the use of infrastructure, blah, 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 limit the exposure of rural areas to expansion. So if you then take that to the next level and you say, we now have this tool, and the tool is there because it's actually trying to maximize, or it's actually a tool that provides us with some insights into how well we're doing and how efficiently we're using the density that's inherently built into the development areas, right? So now you take it to the developer, and the developer is going, all right, so I'm going to develop this piece of property, and I could build 5,000 units of residential, but I'm really only going to build 1,500 because there's cost in proffers, there's cost in time, there's cost in all these other things that weigh into that. And so we're going to be faced with, as a county, right, with inefficient use or underutilization of development areas. So what? So now what do we do? Well, there's got to be something that gives back to the development community that says, we're going to help you increase that density, right? So those are the incentives we're talking about. And so as you think about incentives, my question after that long-winded discussion is, have you looked at incentives that help to maximize development? And is there anything that we as a county can use as a carrot to help to develop and maximize the ability to densify the development areas, right? So one might be, we're going to say, and I'm just throwing this out there, you know, like economic development, right? Right now for economic development, sometimes we'll actually, I don't want to use the word accelerate, but we'll actually find ways to move things more quickly through the pipeline. And we've talked about that for affordable housing. You're coming with 100% affordable housing, you're going to get special treatment. You're going to get moved through. Are there things like that that can be brought to the table? And then the other piece of it, and I'll shut up, is this idea of value. So we're talking about affordable housing having a higher value than retail or commercial or normal, you know, regular market rate housing. We're assigning values to these things. So as we look at the development of these areas across the county, does that come into play? Like, for example, you're bringing 30% affordable housing to this. So we're actually going to give you the special route to go through. Or there's so much housing in Albemarle County right now. We have too much. We need to pull and I know that's not true right now, but we need to pull our foot off the gas and we need to refocus and incentivize other areas of use. So just thinking through, I don't know how that plays into the development area analysis, but it feels like it should, because all those different uses kind of you know, are part of that discussion.
It's the piece about being proactive. So it's great that we will now at real time, as we are approving applications, see the impact on the development area. Okay, we're underbuilding, we're hitting it about there. So we'll be able to see that. So I think that's an important tool. So let's say we do this for 6 months and then we get a number. It's like, oh, we increased by 10% or we decreased by 10%. Then what?
Yeah.
I mean, what we want to do is figure out a path for more development. So here you're measuring it.
That's right.
But how do we, as Commissioner Mitchell said, incentivize, or what are the levers that we can begin to pull to move that needle? So let's not just track it. Let's think about how we move the needle. So when we're having the conversations with developers and they're coming in at 50%, say, well, what is it going to take to get you to 70% or 80%?
Exactly.
So I think that's important as part of this process. It's not just about measuring.
No point, but I'll go at the end of everybody.
You go ahead, Corey.
I really enjoy the conversation about incentives, and it just has me thinking when you look at how do you measure the vitality of any community? There's really three factors, right? There's education, health, and the economy. And so within that context, I think we've touched on all three of those tonight in some capacity, whether it's demographics and the data that Commissioner Bivens has shared. How does that start to be overlaid with health or the economy and economic development? Or we talked about schools, but health, education, the economy, those are the three vitals, right, of any community. So perhaps there is something there, right? I don't know if I have the answer tonight, but as you start to reflect on how do we start to evaluate proposals, like if it's contributing to the vitals of the community, that could just be a different way of looking at it. Because I think we've historically kind of had this a one kind of lane piece to it, right? Like if it's a bunch of affordable housing, then yes, that's it. But I think there might be more to it for a more comprehensive story. And then just around like housing in general, I think of course we need more affordable housing. but I think we need the full spectrum of housing also. So how does that interplay in the conversation? I was talking with our chief economist at the AIA not long ago, and he was sharing that with a survey of, tons of Americans, put it that way. I forget the exact number, but right now with the interest rates at about 6.25%, if the interest rates can fall to 5%, the amount of people that are looking for housing or willing to start being in the market to buy, it goes from like 25% to like 65% with like just like a 1 basis point kind of move. So if that could start to open up housing, like current housing, you got to have people to kind of move out of their existing house and buy to open up more units for other people, right? So this kind of thing about that full spectrum of housing and how does that start to play in this while trying to push on affordable housing, but could there be incentives that's affordable housing plus other housing as well, market rate housing, whatever it is, in that conversation? There's just two thoughts that, as I've listened to this conversation, that might be worth thinking about a little bit more. So,
Commissioner Firehawk, did you have a comment or?
Yeah, I just want to make I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to bring in the notion in this conversation, we can explore this more later, but the idea of not just density, but also quality development.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking along the lines of, the form-based code I know that we did for the Rio area was pretty complicated, but I think we could perhaps come up with some performance standards that we'd like to see in exchange for maybe giving additional density above what is required, because I don't want to just have we've packed everyone in, or they had a lot of affordable housing, so we didn't really pay a lot of attention to the fact that the sidewalks are too narrow and there's no street trees. And it's actually, because there are a few places, and I'm not going to name them, but I don't really like them. Okay, because they're so dense that they feel claustrophobic to me. And I grew up in DC. I'm used to cities. That's a low density city, but nevertheless, it's denser than here, I'll tell you that. So I just would like us to have that conversation at some point. In Charlottesville, we created many years ago, an infill density bonus where we got low impact development, bioswales, green rooftops, things like that in exchange for extra density. We were trying to get more stormwater management on already developed sites. Developers were willing to do it if they could get a little bit of profit by having some extra units. We found that sweet spot. So there are opportunities like that. And I just also want to note that as we go through this exercise of density, the county's going to probably have to have more skin in the game. We've talked about this in the past as a body, that we can't get all the park space and the amenities that give you that healthy community if we just rely on the development community to give us those little tot lots and little, barbecue pits and pocket parks that are not going to be able to meet the demand for putting all these people in there. So if we want a quality urban ring that, doesn't send people scouring off to the countryside to get some quality, I think we need to really, as a county, spend money on parks, spend money on connector roads. We hear about the one in Crozet that everyone's complaining we can't get built. The county says we can't raise the money because the smart scale we're not winning. But at some point, we're going to have to start paying ourselves, even if we can't get the VDOT money. Now that I'm not the supervisors, that's easy for me to say. But I think that the county itself may need to put more skin in the game in terms of parks, sidewalks, the community centers, those amenities that then make the developers say, wow, this would be a really great place to put my development, because they have provided a quality community into which I can fit what I have to offer. Our proffer system is overly relied on the development community to proffer what we want. And all we get is, we're like my Labrador retriever under the table as a kid, getting all the scraps. It wasn't a good diet for him, and it's not a good diet for us either.
My comments are actually fairly similar to Commissioner Firehawks, and I'll echo those, and also Commissioner Bivens's. And I think I would be really interested in a conversation about what performance standards would look like, you know, that for that sort of seventh big move that I brought up, the sort of social and cultural connectivity, and like what are we actually doing for those things? As a tool, you know, this guy is neat. I mean, to have that alongside, you know, the narrative and what are the entrance quarter implications and all these other little things that we get. Yeah, it seems like a reasonable tool. And whether it's gross or net, as far as the number of units, both seem like possibly valuable numbers to at least have at our hands. And then we see something that comes in, it's like, why is that only 35% the max? And then we can have that conversation and say, hey, you know, as far as incentives for getting higher within that, you know, max hypothetical build out, I mean, I kind of leaned over and said, isn't the incentive more profit when you build more homes? But maybe there's some other thing as well. I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, there's a cost too. When you build more, it costs more, but yeah. No, I get it. There's a complex thing. I've never been a large scale developer. That said, I know every time we talk to them that one of the big factors they talk about is that all these redevelopment processes or coming to get permissions to do any kind of rezoning or you know, planned neighborhood development is that it's a long, slow, expensive, and uncertain process. You might sink a lot of resources into it and then have the board say no. And so, you know, having that sort of simpler, quicker, you know, just what Commissioner Firehawk was saying too. I mean, there are some things we want to make sure get done, but let's bake those into policy rather than having them always have to come into this like really complex 3-year process. I think there was some talk earlier about redevelopment, and there probably are some parcels that could be redeveloped that don't show up in here. I'm even thinking about like my own neighborhood because it's what I know best, right? It's a homes in a third of an acre, half of an acre, and it's just single family homes on them. Hypothetically, we could build more homes on there, but it would just have to be rezoned and redone. And to do it though, I mean, like how expensive will homes and land have to get? And do we want to actually let our home values get that high before that becomes something that's tenable and that people want to do? You know, and I think that's a question. I would rather move on this a little bit more quickly before we get to the point that like, you know, I mean, Charlottesville kind of did the big upzoning in the city, sort of looking ahead and saying, let's just allow this. We've not really taken that tack here yet, although we're going into a zoning modernization conversation in the next year and a half. So we'll see how it goes. And then I want to talk about crayons, because I still miss burnt sienna, and I'm gonna go on the record saying that. It was a deep loss when I was a child. But the reason I bring up the crayons thing is that we don't have to include every color on every map, but I do want us to think about, this is a tool that we've been talking about for basically market solutions to this issue. And there's a variety of things we can do to be sort of like YIMBYs on this in a way, right? Like we're trying to build more density in my backyard and everybody's backyard and just in the development area. I don't think market solutions are gonna cut it.
No.
And that's alone. I mean, they have to be part of it, of course. And you know, for 2 years, I've used the metaphor, like we got to use every arrow in the quiver here. And we're only really talking about like one main arrow. And then occasionally we talk about some others. I do want to see what land the county owns that could have potential for this. I'd like to see what land the county could own with some investment. I'd like to see what land would be ripe for social housing or public spaces and public green spaces, you know? Those are the kinds of conversations that I think to put more skin in the game, but also really to think about what would a social housing market alongside a market rate market look like. And I think the more we can move towards that kind of mixed economy on housing, the more we might actually be able to serve the broad demographics and people who work for wages.
Great comments. I just want to highlight one comment before, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna do a little bubble bust.
Put your mic down.
I'm gonna do a little bubble busting. Yeah, you know, so I've spent a lot of time with the census. It's like since that's my old life there. And you know, we're not out of sync with Virginia and with the country. According to the census, we have 66% owner occupied. I don't know, you know, my other life, I was an economist. I don't know how you break that curve. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't know how you break that. I don't know how you break that curve. So I'm gonna back off a bit and say, I don't think it's broken. I think what it is, things have changed to extent and we don't like as a community where they're changing. You know, I don't think we like the fact that the typical house here costs close to $500,000 and we don't have the kind, or $600,000, and we don't have the kinds of jobs that most people can afford that kind of house. I'm going to sort of, I have to jump in on the interest rate bit because I think that is a red herring. When most of the people my age bought their houses, they were paying 13%, 12%, 14% in interest.
The house was $50,000.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You still look at the percentage of the income that's going towards your income towards the house, whether or not it's $59,000 or not. It's still how much is coming out of your pocket to be able to afford that house. Okay, I wasn't making anywhere in the 80s what I ended up making in my life, or when we're close, but I still bought a house. And I think there's a situation that we have here that is, what are we? And I have to deal with Charlottesville, Albemarle a bit because I think we have an artificial economy here. We have an artificial economy that's built on a bunch of wealth matrices, wealth items that is not like the rest of the world. I need to see. If you look at how much, if you look at our demographics, you look at our salaries, you look at the set of the typical household incomes, it is not, we are way above Virginia and we're way above the nation in a lot of that stuff. So I think what we really are fighting with there, and this goes to, I think, what we're talking about, can we get the county to be more proactive and becoming part of the solution of creating housing here? Okay. I think what we're really looking at is that Albemarle County is an anomaly. There's a lot of things in which we follow Virginia trends and national trends. One of the things that we don't follow, though, are income. We don't, and investment, and those number of people who live off of investments here. That we can't change. We can't change that. I can't change your portfolio. Well, I'd like to look at your portfolio. I can't change your portfolio. I know I can't. I know you'd like me to see yours. You'd like me to contribute to yours. And so I think the thing that we're really talking about, and this is the hard stuff, because the markets are going to respond to what those people think that they can get on the return of investment. That's how it works.
So can I just clarify what you're saying? So we're talking about a diminishing resource,
Yes.
right? Which is development area.
Right.
What you're saying is market influences are really going to be what drives how well we do with infill in that development area?
And the ability for the county to say it's going to become an active agent in that.
I got you. Okay, yeah.
Because if the county says it's not going to become an active agent in that,
Yeah.
it's going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just, I'd advise you to do what I'm sure people in your staff do. Go to Zillow or go to Realtor and say, show me an apartment for $1,200. Well, there's a whole bunch of people who can't even pay $1,200. But look at your own.
Yeah.
Look at the salaries in your organization. Most of the apartments that are being built right now are clicking close to $2,000.
Higher.
I'm trying to be, I'm trying to have a bit of optimism here, Madam Commissioner. I'm not trying to be completely a downer on this. And so my point on this is that even if we add more housing units, I don't believe we're going to get something close to what the average person who has a typical sort of job that's not a white or a white collar or a professional job they're going to be for. I think we're locked in a cycle that we got to figure out, and it's not going to be about adding more houses. All right,
Ask,
let's go bust some buttons.
It's good stuff. Can I ask a question of staff? So if you think about, what's your hope in terms of next steps? So when you think about, you're presenting this to us now, you're getting feedback, in your mind, what are next steps?
Excuse me just one second. Mr. Murray has his hand up.
Okay, we're still in discussion.
I just want to make sure we didn't forget him.
We won't close up yet. Thank you, though.
I think the immediate next steps are preparing for the board discussion on January 21st. Commissioner Bivens will be happy to know that the information will be put through a market-based lens using CoStar data.
There you go.
And I think The other next step is figuring out what does the next staff report look like for future development proposals?
Yeah.
How can we integrate this feedback and great conversation into meaningful information to use for future decision making? And I presume that my colleagues behind me have ideas on probably much larger and more meaningful steps than that, but I think that's the immediate next steps.
That's great. Thank you. Commissioner Murray?
Yes, I just wanted to double down on some things that Karen had said. And I realized that right now we're just trying to get a few metrics to sort of move the conversation forward. And it is a move in the right direction. As I said, definitely, I think we need some things that really capture redevelopment. But in terms of what Karen was saying in terms of livability, it would be nice to have some metrics about livability, eventually, be it the distance to a public park, the percent of, green space within an, tree cover within an area, even some environmental factors like, impervious surface. So, I mean, it would be nice to get to those sorts of factors eventually. And I know that staff limitations can't get us there now, but I hope we don't lose that.
Great. We're running out of time here, but just, I guess somewhat in closing, I'm gonna throw out a couple of subjects that we talked about just as a kind of a summary. So first, I thought the idea of the heat map was really helpful. Looking at where the areas are that are prime for development and how that plays out and how that's based on other resources. Incentives, we talked a lot about incentives and thinking through that as a next step. Other opportunities for county involvement and what do those look like? Market influences, and then data and additional data input, and then looking at trends that maybe is a little bit longer reaching than 2022. But there are others that I think that I don't mean to say that's it, but sort of the high level stuff again. All right. Well, with that, any other last comments? Not. Thank you, staff. Great work. This is really an important step.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We will go into recess until 6 p.m. Thank you.
6.
Yes, sir, you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you. We are, perfect. Thank you. We are back in session, obviously. Welcome back, everybody. And we have a quorum. So I will begin by asking for public comment on matters pending before the commission. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to speak on? I figured you probably would. There is no sign up sheet, but why don't we do this if it's okay? I'll ask in the back, I'll ask Ms. McKeel to come up. Supervisor McKeel, would you like to? That would be great. Thank you. This is a little different tonight because we've got a presentation and there are folks who want to speak about the presentation, which is technically on the
Your
agenda.
clerk is not here, and I saw. And I'm here tonight because I needed practice being on this side of the podium.
You're doing great.
Thank you very much. I'm a creature of habit. I'm waiting for but you're not going in there, just talk.
timing it.
Okay, sounds good. Because we're nearing the end of meetings in 2025, and because I'm retiring from public office, I come before you tonight to thank Julian, head down, for his service on the Albemarle County Planning Commission. Julian, during your 8 years of service to the residents of the Jack Jewett District and the entire Albemarle County community, you modeled professionalism and integrity while speaking truth to power. Thank you for the site visits you made in anticipation of the development proposals or rezonings. I know you always visited every one of those sites, and you often walked the entire property. Thank you for all the time we spent together meeting with members of the community regarding proposals that were destined to come before both the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. I always learned from your insightful questions. Your comments and suggested changes during a comp plan review were thoughtful and well-reasoned and often quoted by the Board of Supervisors members. We share a vision to create a more education-centric space for the students on the Lambs Lane campus. And I appreciate the time and effort you spent during the master plan process. You have been a friend, a mentor, and an advisor. The Jack Jewett and the county have benefited from your leadership. Thank you for your distinguished service and lasting contributions. And I made it through without sniveling too much. Thank you for giving me the time on this side of the podium. I'm going to get used to being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Your time is up, ma'am. Thank you. And Julian, thank you for raising the bar so high for other planning commissioners and for the legacy that you lead. With that, moving on to our folks, it's up to you. Whenever you would like to go, you'll have 3 minutes for comments. Just state your name and your general location. Thank you.
Williamson, and I'm here to speak on the Stillhouse Mountain property. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I am an adjacent neighbor and I represent the Colthurst homeowners, which are, just west of this property. My house happens to be the lowest house in term elevation to this property, so I get all the runoff for the neighborhood, and I have a nice pond in my backyard, which is actually a stormwater detention pond from the early days. This house has only been in 2 families. In my previous life, I was an architect, so I'm very aware and protective of old, beautiful structures in our community. And this house is almost 100 years old. It's had 2 families live in it and care for it and preserve and take care of this land. And it has incredible, I think from an architectural gem of a property, I think it has incredible value. And it also, if it were developed, almost a lot of this property is steep slopes and, and I'm also in the asphalt, highway business. So I know a little bit about, moving dirt and stuff. It's a rocky piece of property. And if you were to develop it, it would be very expensive and and most of it is steep slopes with the exception of where the home is and some down in the valley. We're also surrounded on both sides by schools, St. Anne's on one side and the future home of the field school, which is coming in eventually, hopefully, on the other side. But most importantly, the water runoff, if you denuded that whole property to build whatever development was going to happen, it would be an incredible water event for Colthurst and the neighborhood. And we would not be happy about that. And so that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For this, presentation. It's not a staff report. It's not a public hearing.
Hi,
Good evening.
I'm Robbie Knoll. The McLeans introduced me to the project a few months ago to try and determine the feasibility of doing some development in there. And just to sort of qualify my role, I am the principal owner of the building management company. We do a fair amount of development here in this area, both in the city and the county, and we do some enrichment over in the valley. But very much familiar with the entitlement process here in the county. And I dug in for a little while to see what sort of infrastructure would be required, where we could build. And I've got to say that I think it was Scott Clark who put together the report. He's pretty much spot on. In fact, I think 25 units or lots in there might be generous to be able to get him in there practically. But in doing some breakdowns, everything from the grading, the infrastructure costs of putting in the roads, the stormwater controls that would be required, the utilities, and storm utilities. Yeah, and then the unknown about rock. We weren't able to do geotech reports, but we would assume that there's a tremendous amount of rock high there. And that would be a burden we'd really have to look into. Anyway, the best we could tell, we're looking at an overall burden per lot of about $500,000. And that's pretty much a no-go from in our world. If we were to get in there and to develop that sort of thing, it would just be prohibitively expensive. Let's touch on that. Oh, I did want to touch on the view shed. Just being in Charlottesville for 35 years, there's certain homes that you can see on certain ridge lines, and I live in the Bel Air neighborhood. And in the winter, we can see that house along with some other houses. And frankly, personally, yeah, I think it'd be a doggone shame to dilute the beauty of that home from a personal standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the rest of us are family. We appreciate your time here. My name is Chris McLean. It's hard for, I think, all of us to talk about this because it was, my parents owned this house for 40 years. They were anti-bypass people, which may not resonate positively, but they knew that putting a road through this property and the retaining wall that would have to be built, deflecting noise off of the wall would be tragic to the county. All of us were born and raised here. I've been here for 56 years, and went to Virginia, and many of my friends that have come back to this community have said, wow, we love this place. We'd love to live here. It's so beautiful, and the county has done such a great job maintaining the view shed, important view sheds in the county. And I don't know if you all had a chance to read the letter from Sabina Martin, who's with Real Estate 3, just talking about the negative impact that the view sheds, surrounding view sheds would have for property values. And I actually happened to be coming in today from a friend's house that was taking over childcare for me, and in coming in Garth Road and just the prominent side of that mountain and the neighborhoods that would be impacted. But if you go out to Cherry Hill or over to Pantops or up to Albemarle High School or Earlysville Road, you'd see the whatever impact that would have for developing this property. So my mother's dying wish was, she passed away in December, was to get the property under easement. And obviously we can't do that without the county saying it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So we're here asking for that. Staff, Scott Clark's done a really nice job writing it up. I'm waiting for the red light.
I'm watching your time. You have about 45 seconds.
Okay. But that's the extent of it. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of places you can see this property from. If I think we would not have an argument in front of you all other than an emotional one if this was a flat piece of property where it's located. But the not just the view shed, but the water supply going into Ivy Creek in our reservoir is obviously, with the sediment that's already in our reservoir, is obviously a big deal. So we appreciate your time and interest and support. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last time I was in this auditorium, I was walking across that stage, graduating from Lane High School in
Wow.
1967.
Can you do us a favor? Just raise the mic so we can hear you better. That's great. Thank you.
Good enough?
That's great.
If you don't mind, I'm going to read mine.
You mind stating your name?
Yeah, I'll get to that. Well, good evening. I'm Lee McLean, and I was born and raised in Charlottesville. I have commercial and residential properties in the area, and I pay taxes on, and I'm currently co-trustee of the McLean Family Trust, the current owner of the 2700 Barracks Road. I'm here tonight to support Scott Clark's recommendation for 2700 Barracks Road to be eligible for a conservation easement. Our father, Copley McLean, was accustomed to buying and selling real estate to help support his family of 7 children and his wife, Peggy. After buying 2700 Barracks Road in 1984, he and Peggy enjoyed the property of their dreams, centered around family, including weddings, receptions, class reunions, as well as family reunions. They spent the rest of their lives on the property, with Dad leaving us in 2011, and Mom, as Chris said, on December 3rd of last year, 8 days shy of her 102nd birthday. Mom's wish for her property not to be developed was expressed to family and friends on multiple occasions. The family is very fortunate that our brother Chris and his wife Ashley are buying the property and have the goal and commitment to pursue a conservation easement to fulfill Mom's wish as well as their convictions. In addition to what is in Mr. Clark's recommendation and the support of neighbors, there is essentially a 15-acre piece of undeveloped property close to the north side of the driveway of 2700 that borders on the water tower property on the upper side. It is my understanding that the owners of this property have been working on a plan for a residential development, making the importance of protecting the approximately 32.5 acres under consideration more meaningful. It is my hope that the wisdom and foresight of the board will support the recommendations of Mr. Clark for the benefit of a unique green space for the current and future generations of the inhabitants of Albemarle County. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts.
Thank you.
There, Peter McLean, thank you all for your service to the community. Lane High School class of 74 here, last graduating class, and it's good to be back in this space. But thank you too for letting us share some brief thoughts as they relate to Stillhouse Mountain. I sent it to you all yesterday, but as an ecologist, one having a love especially for black bears and osprey before and after studying them as an environmental science major at the university and in grad school at the College of William and Mary in the University of Tennessee, I know the black bears and osprey and all their kin will be celebrating more land and life-giving water and associated resources held in their natural state. One closer to that which sustained wildlife and Native Americans 400 years ago and before. Whether it be roads or shops or homes and all that comes with our rampant development, our diminishing landscape deserves otherwise, nothing less than protection, preservation. 2, giving our ultimate challenge of climate change, one that's defining the contours of the 21st century more than any other, we need to do all we can to save land and water resources, especially the trees and other photosynthesizers and all that contributes to the natural cycles which sustains us, all life. Thank you very much for your consideration of those residents of Stillhouse Mountain, human and otherwise. And may its conservation, its preservation, epitomize treatment of land and water and other natural resources for our beautiful Albemarle County and beyond. We know neighbors in Colthurst, in Belfield, in the colonnades favor keeping Stillhouse Mountain as is, sheltering its waters, maintaining the mature trees on its steep forested slopes, extending the vast viewshed. And at least one other mountaintop dweller, Thomas Jefferson, would well regard our consideration of the welfare of others now and many generations thence. Yes, thanks very much for your consideration.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. Appreciate your comments very much. I wish we could just jump right to that subject. We have a little bit of administrative stuff to do between now and then, but should go pretty quickly. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to matters not on the agenda? All right. Moving on then to the consent agenda. We have 2 items of minutes on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? We have the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Bivens,
Yes, aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Nistel,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
and Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. With that, we'll move on to two items requesting deferral. And the first one is ZMA 2024-5 Belvedere Amendment. As I understand, the applicant is requesting deferral to January 13th, 2026. Is there a motion to defer that application to January 13th, 2026?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? We have the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Nistel,
Aye.
Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Great. We'll move on to item number B, letter B. ZTA 2023-6, STA 2023-3, WPTA 2023-3, and OTA 2024-2, riparian buffer protection standards. There's a request to defer those items to January 27th, 2026. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, may we have the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Mistel,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, we will move on to the presentation, CCP 2025-1 Stillhouse Mountain. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good evening. I'm Scott Clark. I'm the Conservation Program Manager in the Community Development Department. And this item is a request for compliance with the comprehensive plan review for a potential conservation easement. It's located here, tax map 60, parcel 66, just west of the colonnades. And as you heard earlier, the landowners are hoping to place a conservation easement on the property. A more detailed aerial view, and you can see how it lies on the ridge between First and Colonnades. The access is at the northeast corner where it meets Barracks Road. So by law, by Virginia law, conservation easements have to be in compliance with the comp plan for the locality that they're in. And so localities frequently hear from conservation easement holders or landowners wanting to get confirmation that their potential easement is in line with that locality's comp plan. And 95, 99% of the time, the answer is yes, because those properties are fully within an area that's either a rural area, or if it's in a development area, it's in an area of property that's designated for parks and green space or something like that. So in nearly every case, staff can easily answer the question, is this proposal in line with the comp plan? This is the first one I've encountered working here in Albemarle where it wasn't immediately clear from looking at the map. So the reason I say that is that if you look at the map, about a third of the property here in green is in the rural area where our plan says that easements are desired and as part of the land use approach for conservation in the rural areas. But about 2/3 is in the development area. The reason for that boundary right there, you can see it follows basically the top of the ridge. West of there goes to South Fork Reservoir and is in the public water supply. And the eastern side does not and is designated as part of the development area. So if we look within those development area designations to see more detail, that green area is the Parks and Green Systems designation from the Western Neighborhoods Comp Plan land use map. The remaining portions in the development area are blue, which is institutional, which is an old designation that remains from the old US 29 Western bypass plans many years ago, which is no longer part of the county's transportation plan. And then the yellow area is designated as neighborhood density residential, which is 2 to 6 units per acre. The portion that is not in color is in the rural area. You can see the white hatches on that west-facing slope that drains toward the reservoir. Those white hatches on both sides are the critical slopes. Last thing I want to point out is the purple blob that encircles most of the property. That's the area that's in the mountain protection area or mountain protection plan from the comp plan. And these are areas that are designated for protection, both for water supply protection and erosion control, but also habitat reasons and also scenic reasons. So a good part of the property is within that mountain protection area. So the way this breaks down is that about 77% of the property is either in rural areas or in parks and green systems. The remainder is in neighborhood density and institutional. And it's about 20 acres, or just over half of the property is in that mountain protection area. So instead of the usual request where we just have one designation that just says rural area and maybe has an overlay like flood hazard or something like that, we've got 5 different designations of a property requesting information on compliance. So the question then is, what about the remaining 22% that's designated as not rural area or parks and green systems? If the property, which is currently zoned entirely R1, even the RA portion, were to be developed, it's got a theoretical potential of about 36 lots. That's unlikely to be possible due to the restrictions of slopes and limited access on the property. Maybe as much as 20 to 25 lots, but it's limited by, again, the slopes. Portions of the property actually don't have sewer service. So portions of the property would have to have building sites to accommodate septic fields, which again limits the number of achievable lots. But some degree of R1 development is possible across the entirety of the property. In comp plan terms, the problem is that for a third of the property, that's residential development that's not appropriate in the rural area. On the east side of the property in the development area, that large block of parks and green systems would be broken up into individual residential lots, which is not ideal for conservation of parks and green systems. On the other hand, if the property were to be rezoned more in line with the comp plan designations and rather than using the R1 zoning, again, you've got 4 areas that are designated for neighborhood density residential, 2 of which are impractically small to use as part of a development that was solely on this property. And then the 2 large areas, one at the top of the ridge, one at the southern end that are somewhat larger. So again, it's theoretically possible to get 25 or so units on this property. The most buildable areas, unfortunately, are within the mountain protection plan area or mountain protection area. And one of the 2 more buildable areas at the south end is located as far as it can be from the only practical access, which is you can see where the driveway comes up through the critical slopes here. So it's mixed in terms of compliance with the comp plan goals. Some development is possible in line with residential development goals, but it also would impact the mountain protection area. Finally, and I won't read all these off to you, but there are several areas in the comp plan where this proposal is in compliance with policies related to protecting mountain resources, protecting critical slopes, both in the development areas in the green space designations and in the rural areas, protecting and enhancing scenic resources, natural resources, and again, those systems shown for preservation in the master plan land use plans. So at this point, in summary, we're recommending, we found 2 favorable factors. One, that the majority of the property is designated as rural area or parks and green systems, and that limiting development within the remainder of the property helps to protect water quality impacts and scenic impacts in line with the mountain protection plan. And we're recommending that the commission find that the proposed conservation easement would be in compliance with the comp plan. I've covered a lot there, so I'm happy to take any questions you have. After that, I have a couple of motions for you. This is not a public hearing. It's just or an opportunity for the commission to make a finding. So you all can go through the questions, we can have a discussion, and then we'll put the motions up for a vote.
Excellent. Thank you. Great staff report. That's really helpful. Any questions for staff?
I do, but before I do, I just wanted to say too, this is one of those times where I get to learn a little local history while we're at it. And I appreciated all the wonderful things that are written about your parents. I think is very touching and moving to see how Walter McLean, served as a medical professional and also as a sort of stand-up guy civically, and also then how Margaret ran a school for African-American kids during massive resistance. I think that's some of the best stories of good and engaged citizens we can have. I'm also glad that the family wants to preserve this and wants to live on the mountain and keep that home in good shape. But I do have questions, and yeah, I'm reminded a couple times over the comments that I remind myself, it's like, we're not actually looking at a proposal for any sort of development right now. This is just sort of like a thing to keep it from ever happening. And so I had some questions in terms of the hypothetical maximum, which we just talked about in our work session, which I thought we were using gross for that, in terms of the acres, rather than net. And so if we were using gross for that, we've got what? The question is a property owner prohibited from building in green systems? It's like trees on their property.
I'm sorry, is prohibited from?
Building in what's called parks and green systems that are on their property?
Well, the majority of that area is in critical slope. Well, it's preserved slopes
Yeah.
on that side.
Yeah.
So you would have to go through quite a significant rezoning process to change that.
No, I understand that, but I just meant on the green systems, alone. Is that a thing that prohibits tree clearing?
No, in general, as long as you're not impacting those environmental resources that we protect, you would be allowed to develop on those areas.
Sure. So then I'm just doing a quick back of the napkin tally here. It looks like about 25 acres then of the neighborhood 7 portion, the neighborhood density residential portion, and the institutional that won't be used for a bypass. And I mean, if we're talking about the sort of the FLUM map of up to 6 units per acre times 25 acres, we're talking about 150 homes. That's a crazy hypothetical. I realize is not what's in line with the family wants to do, and I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that like that feels like the number that would be the gross that we'd be talking about at some point a generation from now if we were going to. So I just wanted to talk about that. And then just on conservation easements more broadly, I wanted to ask too, I just think about what the purpose is of conservation easements today, and the degree to which they are functioning the way that purpose should be. What is the function or the purpose of conservation easements? What's our intended purpose with these?
Well, under Virginia law, there are conservation easements and there are open space easements. They're basically the same thing. One is held by governmental organizations, one is held by non-governmental organizations. And essentially they're a tool for implementing the comp plan, for protecting resources that are identified as important in the comp plan, which is why both of those state codes say that you have to be in compliance. You can't just drop these anywhere.
Yeah, protecting resources like water will be a very important one, obviously.
Right.
There's some kind of resource you're trying to protect.
Yeah,
Whether it's
I got you.
beautiful agricultural vistas or it's
Yeah.
high value wildlife habitat.
Sure,
That would
sure.
be written into the easement.
I'm wondering about the average conservation easement in this county. Is it a place that if I were a fisherman, could I go fish in a stream on one of these?
Conservation easements don't mandate public access, but they don't necessarily obstruct it. It's kind of a separate question from the overall comp plan compliance, but it is possible to have public parks that are already under easement. In fact, we already have one out adjacent to National Park, the Patricia Byram Forest Park. Is under a county held easement and is also now it was later donated to the county as a park. So it's possible for easements to accommodate public access, but they don't necessarily supply it on their own.
Sure. I saw an article from the Piedmont Environmental Council where they're really patting themselves on the back about having a quarter of our land in this county under conservation easements, which is a hell of a stat. And I'm wondering, those are almost entirely private, correct?
almost entirely privately owned.
Privately owned, yeah, yeah. So if I want to go walk my dog on those, they're not gonna really let me do that.
Right,
Yeah,
and
okay.
that's.
I mean, I
often the
could,
case.
if there's not tall trees, I could probably see some pretty views, as I drive my car past them on my way to more affordable homes in another county.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear the last thing you said.
It wasn't really a question, David. Do conservation easements further out in the county or really anywhere, do they prevent water pollution from agriculture, fertilizer, cow manure, that kind of thing? The things that actually do kind of pollute our water system the most?
It depends on the specific easement. Easements are not uniform across the board. And every easement holding organization has its own particular goals that it's focusing on. So the terms of an easement might be more focused on just avoiding subdivision and allowing ag to continue, or they might be more focused on riparian buffers or forest protection. So it depends on the individual easement.
Sure.
They often, beyond just saying, okay, you can only have 2 lots instead of 20 and 3 houses instead of 50, they often establish wooded areas for protection, riparian buffers. Some of them are protect historic sites. They're all crafted individually toward the goals of the locality, the easement holder, and the landowner.
That's actually cool. I did not realize the variability in those conservation easements. I appreciate the info there. I was curious too, what our county's policy is on the tax breaks that landowners get when they have a conservation easement.
Well, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on the tax end of it. The easement properties in Albemarle are not in the land use tax program. They are simply taxed at the full rate on their reduced value. Most landowners, when they go through the easement process, will have an appraisal. This is slightly unrelated, but they have an appraisal that shows the before and after easement value. And a similar process when the county is doing its assessments, it's going to calculate the value of the property based on its remaining development potential. So that reduced value is what the taxation is based on.
I could have sworn, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't say this with great certainty, but I swear I remember seeing when we had a presentation about land use taxation and conservation easements, that it was like a 50% tax break for conservation easements, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I wish the county assessor was here. I'm not sure it's a single number. I think it, again, depends greatly on the
Sure, no, I understand.
potential of the property.
I appreciate you trying, and I know that getting into the budget questions and the total cost of the county of the 25% of land we've got in conservation easements in terms of reduced property tax is something I think about sometimes when we start worrying about how to build new preschools and how to build new high schools and all that kind of thing. I appreciate that you've answered my questions. I do. I'll let my colleagues take over from here.
Great. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Notwithstanding the wonderful family that this property belongs to, sort of the primary question for me has always been, this is an owner-initiated process. The owner never has to develop the land. The owner can decide from now until eternity that this land is never going to be developed. And so the calculus, and since we're not hearing it now, I don't have a chance to talk to hear from the owner. And I understand your mom asked that this be done. I have full appreciation of, but the owner does not have to develop the land. That's where I always started from this. And so this is a unique piece of property in that it's got some terrain that's difficult that would be difficult to put any sort of housing. It's not like that one piece we saw near the Ivy store, which was they were taking down a lobby. Yeah, not the Hobby Lobby, but the lobby farm, and going to put houses out there. This is not like that. This is a very different terrain there, but I go back to the piece that this is a property that one never has to, you don't have to develop it. And so this is a decision, and we've talked about this before. And it's not, so I want to be very careful that the applicant or the family doesn't think that this is about you. Although it's going to feel like it's about you, but it's not. The whole idea is this the only chance, because this is, in my 8 years, this is the only time I've ever seen this a presentation like this. Because usually the property is purely in the rural area. And so it just goes off and does what it needs to do. But the whole piece is for me, and so you'll get this as business people, get this, that this is an individual initiated reduction in taxes. And the question always is that individual initiated reduction in taxes something that the county achieves or receives a benefit, a like-kind benefit? And I'm not, so again, this is not about you, but this is about the whole process of individuals being able to set their property in a tax basis, which in your case, it's different because part of it's in the development area. So we get to have this discussion. Sorry, when you go home, have a bourbon and branch or something like that, if that's something that you do. But this is the point here, is that we're having an individually initiated tax reduction, which is reasonable because it's what the code says. And should the county not be involved, not in this one because this is a unique situation, but should the county just be involved in that kind of situation? Because it does have it has an impact on our taxable land. And it's something that won't be reviewed, not unlike the agricultural and forestry districts, which there's a review process there. There's no review process on this. Once a piece of property is established in a conservation easement, it stays like that forever. And if you want to take it out, then whoever wants to take it out, they have to go back and capture that. They have to capture those that avoided tax, and that's fine. They can do something like that. But that's really what my piece is. That this is another one of those situations that the county will have an impact on its tax base without having a fuller discussion about it. I'm in favor. So I should also say to give you a bit of, I'm in favor of this, but I still am questioning the ability to pull the trigger on that. I would also ask the applicants that I was concerned when I read it, because your brother and your mother are deceased. And so I was wondering who owns this piece of property as the trustee of the, but as the trustee of your dad's trust, who owns the piece of property? So I know when you make the transition, that'll change, and that the property will be put into, I think one of you know, into you and your spouse's name. But that was a piece that concerned me when I saw it, since I knew that everyone involved had deceased. But I'm pushing this on this issue about conservation easements are the way for people to move money out of the county's coffers without the county really being involved in it, and that just doesn't feel right to me.
Well, if I might jump in here then, it's not just that. Yes, that is a benefit to the landowner, but the reason that we have a conservation easement program is because it motivates people to do things that are ultimately usually in the public good. So what is the public good? You're framing it as losing tax base. But the public good side of the equation, the other side of the equation is protection of steep slopes, protection of water quality, protection of watersheds, protection of wildlife, and other values that are clearly espoused in the comprehensive plan. And then to answer Nathan's question a little bit more fully than the staff, I'm on the board of an organization, and we specifically hold riparian easements for the express purpose of providing public access to rivers. We build ramps, we provide public camping, and we often buy land that's under threat of development on a river where people want to camp, hunt or fish, and hold it until the locality scrapes up the money 20 years later or never. We have hold easements for multiple decades. So there's many different types of easement holding organizations. The Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District has a riparian easement to help landowners get a break. And there are situations where rural landowners, I'm not commenting on this one, where they can't afford to pay the taxes on their land. And so in order for us to continue to have farmland, we have a way for them to have an avoided tax. And some landowners are very impoverished, and they can, in Virginia, sell that tax credit to someone else who needs to buy that credit. So it is a system to allow rural agricultural landowners to be able to afford to remain in farming when the land values all around them have escalated, not because they want to get out of farming. So I just wanted to balance the scales there a little bit in this conversation. But I think your points are well taken in terms of like, if we're looking at gross density, yeah, then what is the development potential of this property? This is a weird one, and I agree with Scott. I asked him before we started, why are we hearing this? I've never ever heard one of these, and it is because it's got all those weird things going on it. So in general, if I made a blanket statement, it would be that I don't think we should have conservation easements in the middle of development areas. There's one in the middle of Stanton that's inside the city limits. There's a bunch of cows, some random cows and a lady's house. And it's like, it's really a dumb spot. And I don't know why that ever happened. Yeah. And that everybody's around them. She has fun garden parties, but nevertheless, it's just a dumb place for a conservation easement. It doesn't have any particular amazing environmental value. So I would have, if I was there, I would have voted against that one. But in this case, this particular one has steep slope. It's just not a good development site. But I think all your points are definitely worthy in terms of questioning, do we always just say, yay, conservation easement? And, just because it's a conservation easement, not all of them are in the right location. And so we have to evaluate them on those merits. But then when you lay all the environmental constraints on this, I don't think I wouldn't want to put houses on that slope.
No.
So I'll just leave it at that. But I know where you're going with the argument, and it makes sense, but I just wanted, for the public's benefit,
Totally.
to remind us that there are reasons why we put easements on land.
And to clarify just a tiny bit, I mean, obviously I'm building a strong straw man here, right? That was kind of the thing. And it is not at all about the land. I think this is a great place to keep on top of that mountain. I do countywide worry that I feel like we've got an awful lot now, and this notion that we need to keep encouraging more voluntary measures and more conservation easements. On the whole, I don't really know if I agree with that.
Yeah, and I'm not making case that all land should be in conservation easement or anything. As one farmer told me specifically, Karen, perpetuity is a damn long time. So, they're not the right tool for everyone.
And your second piece on it is the first piece for me. If in fact we have a commitment to agriculture and to small family-based agriculture, not to commercial, not to sort of big corporation, then I would also like to see the county be actively involved in promoting that. Because the thing that I've noticed over the years of me being here is that we have small farmers, family farmers who have put their land in the conservation easement, sold the easements, but there was nothing that came back behind them to help them be successful farmers. And eventually they had to leave the land. They had to leave the land because the first step out was the conservation easement. The second step that would have been helpful is to help them be better farmers. And that's the thing that I think as a community, this is when we're talking about being intentional. If that's who we want to be part of our community, then we need to be more actively involved and not just let it happen, not sit back and just have passive actions.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the Soda Water Conservation District, and we do have a lot of active local farmer programs. So there are, again, you guys are speaking quite the extremes this evening, but there are a lot of great programs for young farmers. The ACE program, though, we can make a plug for that. The county, that program specifically looked at development rights, but also the need of the farmer to be able to afford to keep that land, and would the ACE program tip the balance for them to be able to continue in agriculture. The average farmer is like approaching 60 years old, and they don't have necessarily heirs to take it on. That's one reason we lose farmland, but the other reason, there's many, but one of the other chief reasons is affordability. Just the ability to continue to afford the land. And our land is very expensive here.
That's right.
This is not Buckingham. This is not Louisa.
Great comments. Any other thoughts? The only thing I can add is simply.
Well, I have a comment actually.
Yeah, sorry, Lonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can answer some of the questions that were raised. First, about whether this reduces tax revenue for the county. That's actually not true. But in most cases, properties like this are already under land use valuation. Scott, can you confirm that this property is already under land use?
I believe it's not, because it's in R1 zoning and largely in the development area, so I don't believe it is and wouldn't qualify. Use value taxation wouldn't qualify.
My understanding was that being a development area didn't automatically disqualify you as long as you met the qualifying conditions of having the acres of forest or.
I'll double check.
And it is in it.
We're getting,
did-
we're getting
Okay.
yes, well, from the applicant, we're getting the affirmative, yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, that was my understanding. So what happens is most of these properties, because their size, are already in land use valuation. And so when you put an easement on a property that's in land use, the assessment, the actual assessment goes to the land use value. So currently, the delta between the land use value and the assessment value, we pay money to the city of Charlottesville in revenue sharing on that delta. So we lose money. We're paying revenue sharing to the city of Charlottesville for revenue that we don't collect. So that's a really important thing, and it can be a substantial amount of money. I mean, across the county, it's millions of dollars. But when the easement is placed, then the actual value drops to the land use value. When that happens, it reduces the amount of money, not only that year, but forever, that we pay to the city of Charlottesville and revenue sharing. The other thing that it does is that it also affects the formula by which we get money from the state for schools. Because the way the formula works, it doesn't take into account revenue sharing, but it also it takes into account our taxable real estate, right? So if our taxable real estate goes down, then it increases the amount of money that we get for schools and so forth. So in terms of that question, I think it's really important to know that actually these conservation easements are saving county taxpayers money across the county in a very substantial way.
Lonnie, I'd have to see some numbers on this, pal. I mean, it's the idea that we're saving more by paying the city less than we would just get from actual property tax is a little far-fetched without seeing the numbers.
So I would have liked to be able to pull up the county GIS and actually give you the actual amount of money that we would be saving on this individual property. But since they made the changes to the GIS system, I can't pull out the numbers like I used to be able to.
Sure.
But if the county would provide me those numbers then I could probably get a pretty good estimate of the exact amount of money that would be saved on this property.
This is all great conversation. I feel like we've gone beyond the task.
We
a
have,
little bit.
yeah. I just use my bully pulpit when I-
Actually, one thing one person I've learned a lot from is Rob McGinnis, to shout something out. He should come to one of the planning commission meetings and give a primer, like we get primers on certain things on conservation easements, land use. Although I think Ms. Firehawk is also an expert in that area, as is probably Lonnie. So anyway, without any more, I guess, comments from me, I'll just say +1 to Commissioner Firehawk. I think what you said was spot on. So thank you. Any other comments? Discussion? All right. So do we have a model motion?
Since you've never
Mr. Scott,
had this.
someone like to make a motion?
I move that the conservation easement proposed at CP 2025-0001 Stillhouse Mountain is in compliance and substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan for the reasons identified as favorable in the staff report and discussed this evening.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bivens?
Madam Clerk, are you with us?
She's there. She's there.
I'm here. Mr.
There you
Bivens?
are.
Sorry,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Moore,
Oh, sorry.
Not your turn.
try
Sorry.
again. I'll start all over. Mr.
Okay.
Bivens, one more time.
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
No.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Great report. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate your comments.
You guys.
All right, moving on to committee reports. Does anyone have any committee reports to share?
I do. So I attended the Three Notch Trail meeting over at West Albemarle, where they showed the three different some of the different routes they're looking at for the Three Notch Trail and some of the conditions that they were, weighing about. Some of the trails would take it through a more urban area. Some would take it through less developed areas, and some of the, whether we weigh some of the factors like how easily it would be to build the trail versus how accessible the trail would be and so forth. So it was interesting to see those different factors that are being considered in development of the trail. Also, I attended the MPO Tech meeting, and we also we recommended moving forward 5 projects for smart scale. The US 29 250 off ramp improvements at Barracks Road. US 29 US 250 off ramp extension at Ivy Road. US 29 250 the off ramp and the on ramp for both US 250 and 29. And then US 64 5th Street connections and sidewalk connection. US 29 interchange access and park and ride improvements. There was also a lot of discussion with all these projects about, are there ways that we can tweak these projects for more multimodal transportation? Particularly, a lot of them may not result in, some of them may even disrupt some of the current ways that people bike. And so how can we make sure to preserve those multimodal connections as best as possible while making traffic better at the same time?
Great, thank you. Any other reports?
We were due to have a report at the Hydraulic 29 last evening to hear about the hoped for changes at Charlotte Humphreys Park, which is part of the county's urban park push, but we were all in the rural part of the county, so none of us could come.
Yeah.
And then we're also going to hear about the park that's down the street from Charlotte Humphreys Park at the Hills.
Oh, the new pocket park on Hillsdale?
Hillsdale. So there was going to be a celebration of moving forward, but we couldn't come, so we didn't have it.
I'll report out on one on November 20th, so it's a while back, feels like about a year ago. The 5th and Avon Street CAC met, and we primarily reviewed two projects, a community meeting for 2 projects. One was Parham Circle Storage. There's a prospective storage building that's being planned for the area adjacent to Monticello High School across the street, up where the market is. There's a vacant piece of land right next to the bank there, across from the Food Lion. And you'll see this in the staff reports. The community was a little bit concerned about fencing, lighting, traffic, truck traffic, noise, and visibility. So pretty much everything.
They were bothered about schools.
They were not worried about schools. So
There you go.
and just to be fair, I mean, the developer presented a compelling case in that he was considering visibility, taking that into consideration. The ARB would have to review this. So it falls within the entrance corridors, and that use does not burden schools, and also is limited traffic, and they would limit their hours to reasonable. I don't think they were open past, I forget what time it was, but not late.
Early evening.
Yeah. So the other community meeting was the William Mills Industrial Park, and we'll be hearing that next week, actually, I believe, next Tuesday, which
Correct.
was to fill the floodplain, and they made some minor modifications to the size of the floodplain that they're going to be impacting. And they've also done a significant amount of new engineering for what that's worth. So we'll have a lesson in engineering next week at the planning commission. So they shared a lot of that. And then on the flip side, from the community, as you might expect, there was a lot of similar comments to what we heard before. And I would say the community probably felt there wasn't a material change in the application, for what it's worth. That was it. Any other committee reports or no? All right, moving on to the review of the Board of Supervisors meeting Mr. McDermott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Missile. The board meeting on December 3rd was actually fairly light with any land use items. That was the school board, Board of Supervisors joint meeting, which I'd encourage everybody to listen to if you have a chance. There were a lot of interesting things that came out about, you know, future of schools and looking at trying to build new schools. So a lot of interesting things that I think you'd have to really watch the recording if you want to capture it all. The only land use item that was up there was the ag forestal districts. We had 3 district reviews that you all had seen that were all approved by the board as well. That was Batesville District, the Nortonsville Local District, and the Green Mountain District. So these came to you all a number of months back. The board agreed with your findings.
Great. Thank you. Any new business, old business, or items for follow-up? If not, I will adjourn us to the next meeting, which is Tuesday, December 16th at 6 p.m. here. See everybody then. Thank you.